So, guys, I do want to talk to Jay Williams, and I also want to talk to you guys, and I want to talk a little bit about Jay Williams and how he's really impacted my life. And if you guys don't know who Jay Williams is, he's a YouTuber that served 10 years in prison, and it was like for a bunch of different charges. And he has this channel called Let's Live Life, and he actually goes out there and he talks about prison stories, and his intention is two things, which is number one, which is to encourage people not to go down the same path of prison. And then his other intention is also just to remove this glamorization culture of prison. And that's definitely, very important because, there are a lot of stereotypes, particularly in the black community of, rappers and other people glamorizing prison. And then what some people don't know about those rap videos is that, sometimes they're actually funded by prisons or Department of Corrections because they're encouraging the younger generation, be it any skin color or any background, to say, okay, well, the prison culture, being a gangsta is cool. Like you're falling into that cycle. And then also, too, that some people just say, okay, as we know about American system, it's not about it's about incarceration, not about rehabilitation. And as the old saying goes, prisons are made for poor people, rehabilitation was made for rich people. And as somebody who works in the psych ward, it's more about medication than rehabilitation. So, try to hook you and exploit you whatever way, either by putting medicine in your body, either putting you into jail so you're working on the slave plantation. And what that means is that most people don't know that slavery is still allowed in America. If you are a prisoner of the U.S., you are allowed to be forced into involuntary servitude, and also you're paid piss poor wages. There are many stories of prisoners being forced to fight forest fires, and they may get paid maybe pennies on the dollar an hour, and then maybe some time removed them from their sentence, put their lives in danger, and other things like that. So when you have people like Jay Williams, like really educate people and say, prison is not just, it's not a place where being tough or machismo is rewarded. It's not a place where, it's like the movies where it's like a comedy about people being bitches or whatever. It's a real serious situation. It's important because some people are a little detached from that reality, or sometimes people may need to hear those wake up calls. So I really appreciate his education on that. The next thing that I want to say is that for my life, he's really helped me out. I was started to watch Jay Williams a few years ago, and I was one of those people who watched the Boondocks and other shows where they joke about prison rape and they turn that into a comedic thing. And even though like Boondocks was satirizing the booty warrior and his character, I think with Jay Williams it was two things. It was also just like that gritty style, and his gritty style is to be real with people. And I've seen that more in how I talk and how I communicate, and that's what draw me to Jay Williams is that he's real. I remember a few years ago when I was doing filmmaking for the 40-hour film project. I've told the story a million times that I said that my film was inspired by how I was struggling with suicide and depression from traumatic experiences, and either lost control of my emotions. One thing that I'm proud of was that I was real. I was saying, what, good art sometimes can be inspired by personal hurt or personal struggles, and I'm proud of myself. And I'm also proud there's people like Jay Williams who tells people like me that, no matter how ugly the story is, you can share it as long as you do it in a professional way like he does. I don't see him kind of have emotional breakdowns or sound like a crazy person. I know that there's some things that hurt us deeply where we don't have composure, and I've learned that if I want to articulate myself the same way Jay Williams does, I need to kind of be better at having composure because now I have composure. The other thing about Jay Williams is that he honestly was a role model for me after I lost one job. And to me, I saw a man that just, changed his life. He went from being in jail to, I think he was in a halfway home, they call it when you get out of jail. They don't put you back in society. They have to keep you at a place and just see how your behavior is and just make sure there's a plan for you. And then, he started, and I may be thinking Big Herc really, but then he started, get wife and kids and just get his life together and stay out of trouble and Also, he's just like me, who has a personality of, maybe he has some antisocial disorder, or maybe it's antisocial disorder brought on by trauma, because he did reveal that, he had a rough upbringing. So sometimes that can lead to a person having self-destructive or antisocial or sociopathic behavior towards himself or other people. In the case of him and me, some self-destruction, really. So I think that what I saw from him, what made me a role model of him, was that he was struggling to be a better person. And definitely you are in a world where, unfortunately, sometimes when you're a person like Jay Williams, you become a target, because obviously, you're encouraging people not to go to prison. The government does not like that, because that's how the government makes its money. The same way, I've spoken out about racism, ableism, competitions like the 48-hour film project, where, it's, as people say, that if you participate in it, there's a huge, it's like it comes off as this professional filmmaking competition that invites everybody, when I've dealt with my fair share of racism, ableism, double standards, and other things like that. And also, I was at a point where I was talking about stories about being bullied, or being somebody with mental health issues or antisocial issues, or being behind socially. And that, even though I live in a northern state, and where people say it's like places like up here, places like Connecticut are accepting, it's not really like that. Or I've met many filmmakers in Connecticut who know how to facade themselves. They'll be bullies and racist and take advantage of people with mental health issues to get ahead, but just to speak out and be like, okay, this stuff has to stop, really. So he's inspired me to speak out about, racism, ableism, injustices, and other things like that, and be real, but also talk about my life. I think that another hard thing that, and I'll say this about Jay Williams, is that one thing I've learned is to talk about my past and my trauma. I know, like, I've done some videos about my family. I've talked about the time that I lost self-control and I had to spank my younger brother for a bunch of bad behavior when he was 3 or 4 years old, and how many times in my life when he acted out, my dad was either too complacent, or be like, okay, since he argues too much, I'm actually going to remove punishment. So I'm happy that he inspired me to speak out. He also inspired me to speak out about past jobs. Like, I've dealt with sexual harassment, workplace bullying, and double standards. So he inspired me to speak out about that. He also inspired me to talk about situations of emotional abuse or domestic violence or other things that have happened in my life. Because, I did grow up within that generation, and he did grow up with that too, of honor thy parents, meaning that I was adopted out of an abusive situation, and I was told to forgive and forget, and really honor the fact that I have a good life, and I was raised by 2 gay men that really love me. When my adopted parents have, like, their own form of being behind social, have their own form of emotional maturity, have their own form of looking at me as an African American man that they adopted when I'm actually mixed race. And then also, that part of my mental health issues was just a lot of the antisocial behavior that I was around growing up as a kid. Like, my parents just being so opinionated and condescending and undermined, that I didn't grow up with a lot of self-esteem. My parents just, flipping out about money. Like, I remember one time, my dad went to the bank and he put his card in the ATM. He wanted to give me $5 to buy McDonald's for a field trip, and he only got 20. But he only was able to get a $20 bill. So he gave him the $20 bill. He said, if you spend more than $5 on this, I'm gonna break your fucking hand. That $20 is enough is to feed the family for a week, and other things like that, really. And I remember, like, how sometimes I even paid for my own field trips, or if there were school parties. I would pay for that at as a teenager, as a middle school kid, because I know my parents would go into conniptions about money. Or I remember, like, how I used to run track in my dress clothes, my school clothes, until my father got a call from the coach, and I told him the story that you guys flip out about money, and my dad just said, you don't ever you don't ever do that, because you make me look like a cheap bastard. When that was kind of the case in many situations where he was kind of cheap and all that. But just really just talking about the hurt my parents and family have caused me, and really removing that facade of, okay, honor thy father or forgive thy father, is important, because we gotta care, we gotta show people as people, really. And definitely my parents are very flawed people. They've caused me a lot of hurt and low self-esteem, but it's important for me to tell those stories to encourage other parents to not make the same choices, to if they have a kid with a mental health issue, to respect their kid. If their kid's actually mixed race, me who's half black, I know it's like quarter black, quarter Native American, over 50% white, that look at me as mixed race. Don't be like, okay, I adopted this black child, and you know what, I'm just a gay couple adopting these three black boys, when that's not accurate. So he helped me with that. But I think the most important thing he helped me out with is that I got released from a job that I had 3 years ago, that I worked for almost 10 years, and I've had a bunch of different jobs at the time. But one of the jobs I got released from, I spent a long time at, and I was fired for bad behavior. But I remember when they investigated the bad behavior that I did, there was a bunch of lies. My boss was saying things like, okay, nobody's allowed to go to Dunkin' Donuts or Subway or other things on campus. Staff wasn't allowed, when staff does that every single day. I remember when I was investigated, some people were talking about my bad behavior, and they said some things like they felt that I was dangerous because I would wear black clothing or a black trench coat or black pants when I worked at my former job, when I would wear them in the fall or whatever. I was in Fantasy City, and then some people said, oh well, they thought that I was weird or special needs or a hobo or at my old job, because I used to work at a college. And I remember talking to my therapist, and he would always say things like, I should see the silver lining, which is this is great that it's happening to me, that I'm getting fired, because it's going to motivate me to get a better job that's more professional, because that job had issues of double standards. And I also remember getting a lawyer to help me out, and my lawyer talked to my psychologist. My psychologist was saying that I suffer from severe antisocial issues, and honestly, maybe the job that I'm at wasn't right for me. And then after my lawyer spoke to him, my lawyer spoke to me, and then I had another session with my therapist later that week after I spoke to my lawyer, and my therapist said, nah, I'm still on the fence, really. I need to think about it a little bit more. So he went from saying I have a serious antisocial issue to my therapist to contradict himself to me. And then when I left him some bad reviews, my therapist, he said that that's confirmation that I have an antisocial issue. And then I sent a letter back to my therapist, and he said, a couple months, saying that, okay, there's things that you do that I talked about online that are true about you. You show up sometimes 20 to 40 minutes late for an hour session. You say things like you do more than being another black man going to jail, when I mentioned to him many times that I'm mixed race. And it seemed like to me that he wanted me to be, like Chris from Everybody Hates Rock, just this proud African American man, and other things like that. And he did say, I may have an issue with conspiracies. He also said that, okay, you do have antisocial disorder, and I have no respect for you, especially once I realize it. And you're no former victim, when I dealt with living with a relative with very sexually inappropriate behavior, parents that didn't really care when I was sharing stories about my relative, or I worked at a job where I dealt with workplace bullying. I was almost murdered by the police because I worked at a job that was almost robbed by its own security guards. I was actually laughed at by my manager for almost being murdered by the police and other things like that. My counselor's mentality was only focus on personal accountability, which helped me out. But whenever other people did bad things to me, I have to work hard and bury my feelings and soldier on. And when I was dealing with disrespect and other hurt from family members, oh, well, mind your father, you got to appreciate your father. So very much like, whenever I did bad things to others, it's a big deal. But when other people did bad things to me, it's a big deal that I don't career advance, really. Always there's always something to criticize about me, really. So I remember going through that time. That was very hard for me a couple of years. But one thing I learned from Jay Williams is that sometimes, life is unfair. He did talk about how, he had a public defender, I believe, and he said like how the public defender did a deal to get him in a situation where he had to deal with a lot of time. He also was in situations where, like in prison, like he talked about how his wedding band, his ring was thrown out and stuff like that. He's dealt with situations where people have fucked with him or manipulated him or took advantage of him or sometimes put him in situations that would make him angry. So if he loses control of his emotions, that would mean a couple more years on the prison plantation. The same way I was dealt with a hand of whenever I got bullied or disrespected. My family's philosophy, my therapist's philosophy was always I'm in the wrong for not getting a better job. But whenever I misbehaved or whenever I got mad and I decided to say, okay, well, since a lot of mean, antisocial, sociopathic, and taking advantage of people came into my life and hurt me, I should be the same way. I remember my therapist saying, just shrugging one day, and then a couple of years I went down that path and I created a bunch of problems for myself. And, he never really kind of connected the dot, really. There was always, like, as I said, there's always frustrating situations and him never really listening. And especially when I got fired and there was a bunch of lies and it was clear that I was taken advantage of, my therapist just only focused on my behavior and really didn't care. And I remember like one time I was talking to my therapist and that this is what the conversation that really broke us was that gotta check my time. But the conversation that really broke me and my therapist was that I went to New York City and I was spent a week in a hotel thinking about suicide if I wanted to commit suicide. And I was talking to him a little bit about that. And then also, the other thing too is that he allowed me to leave him messages. And I think one time he just said, you need to figure out, you need a way to figure it out. You need to figure out a way to figure it out. You need to figure out your own problems. You need to figure out a way to get over it. And he hung up the phone on me. But I understood he was in the session, so but that felt very hurtful. But the way he just like hung up got to me. And then he also said something like, I sound like a crazy man when I'm on the phone. So I just left him bad reviews. And then he said, no matter what you've been through, you're no former victim. And I felt very hurt they said that, rightfully and sincerely yours. And then just to say a few months later after I talked to him in a letter, once I realized that he had antisocial issues, I lost all respect for you. But, you can do well, like to just get that, like punch in the gut really from a therapist, especially one that was also a bit racist, was very hurtful. But my therapist really wanted me to learn personal accountability, which I've learned. So I think that with Jay Williams, seeing his journey of, getting his life together and then talking about, the traumatic and ugly and graphic things he's been through was very similar to my journey of sometimes sharing the ugly graphic things that I've been through while getting my life together, or just saying that I've been through all these things and I've made some bad choices. I've reacted to my anger. I have anger issues. And I also am angry because nobody really gives a shit about what I've been through. Jay Williams kind of was that person that had a similar situation to mine. I've used to do a bunch of antisocial behavior and I've worked very hard not to do it. And atone. Like I worked like between 64 and 88 hours at a hospital. I've definitely been in situations that could have led to going to jail or whatever in my life, but I've worked so hard to just stay out of trouble really. And it's been inspired by Jay Williams because as I said, I remember like one story he told about this prisoner that was dealing with a gang and whatever, and he was like talking about like how this prisoner made like this flapjack with billiard balls or whatever in it, and he was like fighting all these people. And I like what Jay Williams said because the way he set up the story was like he's like this badass or this action figure, and then Jay Williams was like no, each time a week or two goes by and I'm home, I worry about him. You think this is like action and cool. No, it's sad because I have to worry about if my friend's dead or not, and I know that if nobody talks to you for a long time, they're possibly dead. So I like how he kind of just really worked very hard to say no matter what I'm telling you, it may be an entertaining story, it may be a funny story, it may be a funny story about crazy people and crazy characters, or it may be a cool story about comeuppance and somebody being a badass. It's still all just, as he said, we're just, prison's just a crazy world inside a crazier world. It's all that really, and I thank him for all that. I thank him for the fact that, in 3 years, I had really bad travel phobia, but I've traveled to all 50 states except for South Dakota. I'm actually going in 2 days to South Dakota. And then for my birthday this year, around that time, I'm going to Wyoming. I went as far as Adak Island. I went as far as north as Point Barrow. I've I love professional wrestling. I've met Dustin Rhodes, Rob Van Dam, Bryan Danielson, and a lot of other wrestlers, and a lot of people that I'm fans of. I left. I've made peace with my father. I got in touch with my biological father. I made peace with a 48-hour film project, and I know that that's been like a very toxic thing for me. I've also made peace with people who have bullied me and have hurt me. I was going to get married to this girl that I was in love with, and it didn't work out. And she married somebody else because he had money, and she was saying things that after she got married on her Facebook. I appreciate my opportunities, and that was code for saying, what, she just wanted a man that could take her from her situation, which was being poor and taking care of her mother, who lived for a little too long, so she couldn't really have a life outside of being her mother's prisoners. And she's kind of said that to me. So he made me kind of like, make peace with that. Even though I loved that girl, and I understood that she was hurting from other things she's been through her life. It made me realize that, my friend was what she said. She was a cold person that was raised to just, only think of herself and only think about what was beneficial to her. And, she's with her husband, and it's taken 5 or 6 years, and they've not really built a house. They're trying to build a house, but they've always been struggling on that. But it's always accomplishing these things to kind of overcompensate for the fact that she married into an opportunity, and that's not real love, really. That's just, her issue of low self-esteem, and that's also her issue of, somebody who's a very sexual person, so prostituting yourself into a relationship. And then just saying to myself, I wish I got to know her a little bit more, the same way she wished she got to know me, where she kind of had to understand, relationships are about, seeing more than somebody as a security blanket. And I had to learn that I couldn't be in relationships until I got my mental health issues under control, really. And also had something more to offer, really, So, it was like Jay Williams really inspired a lot of maturity in myself. And he also really inspired me to have a mentality that, I work at a hospital. I've heard, sometimes I work in a child psych ward, I hear the word nigger over 100 times a day. Sometimes I can be cleaning everything, and the patient can have an idiot issue and throw shit against the wall and trash my work, or dump a trash can and there's like tampons and maxi pads with the bathroom and the floor's all bloody. Like a few weeks ago, I was about to leave on time, and then somebody took a shit on the floor in a COVID room. This is like an older guy, and I had to go back and clean it. And then I had to tell the nurses I'm not putting on the COVID gear because I get heat stroke really quickly, and just to hold myself together. And I think that's one big thing he's always taught me is that, part of being an adult is holding yourself together. Part of being an adult is focusing on the award. Like all the traveling I've been doing, I probably traveled over close to 40,000 miles in 3 years. So yeah, I've kept myself together a lot more than I did at my old job, and a lot more than I did at jobs prior. I tolerated bullying at a prior job, but the last job I had that I got fired from, I just responded to bullying, disrespect by being a bad employee. I remember the day that I got released from that job, I was just eating a big pizza. It just had a voice in my head saying oh, well, you know what? You're going to be here forever. They're probably never going to figure out a day to fire you. And I got fired that day, really, because I was so much of my own bullshit. I remember buying a $30 pizza and just throwing it all in trash and not eating a bite because I was so upset about getting fired that day. But I remember how that was very immature. Oh, well, you buy a $35 pizza from Frank Pepe's and you throw it in the trash because you got fired that day. And then also, before I got fired, I remember my boss calling me and said, oh, can you bring your phone into work? And then he said, oh, well, you know what, have a great day. You have a great weekend. You're a great employee. An hour and a half later, I got fired. And when my supervisor was talking to the main manager was saying, I don't want to get this guy on my fucking campus. and just to give me a little disrespect. But then a few years ago, I told him about a coworker that was coming to work drunk, taking out his penis and peeing by the dumpsters and almost assaulting me because he was coming to work drunk, speaking different voices. He did nothing about that coworker because they were friends, and this guy was very manipulative. But they were willing to get rid of me for a lot less, and they were even doing something where the supervisor of the night shift, who had that employee who still works there, they were saying, okay, well, we're going to take naive people, we're going to have him work with this guy and do all his work. When you're allowing someone to come into work drunk, take out his penis, pee in front of employees, and almost assault people. Southern Connecticut State University, and that. But I learned, how it was bad that I responded from that bad experience, from being forced to work with this guy, to just ruin my life, and then also getting hurt from my therapist, my father, because they said in response to this man, De'Aaron Jones coming into work, taking out his penis, peeing by dumpsters, coming to work drunk, speaking different voices, being expected to clean up and do his work, and his supervisors putting work on top of me. And whenever I do all De'Aaron Jones work, they say like, okay, no, that's actually him doing it, but you're not doing your job, and other things like that. But being forced to work together and taking this bullshit and having him criticize and put me down and push my button, so then I hit him and then he hits me back. In that hypothetical, doing just like what they say as a form of workplace bullying, which is the sabotage bullying. You take a great worker, and you put them in an unwinnable situation, such as working with somebody who comes into work drunk and doesn't do their work. And then whenever all the projects don't get done because it's like it's two people working instead of three people working, you get the blame for him not doing his part, really. And then he criticizes you, he starts fights with you, he's trying to antagonize you. It's a rough thing to deal with, and it was really bad that when I told my father about it, my therapist about it, they're both their mentalities was just, get a better job. Ignore what he does, ignore the fact that he takes his penis out, ignore the fact that he almost assaulted you, ignore the fact that you told yourself, that hard worker, that caring about the job passion died inside of me after I had to deal with this guy. And this guy was like saying that I'm stupid and retarded and other like ableism terms. And my manager said, if you report to human resources, that's considered snitching. And people can usually spread rumors about you. Even managers manipulating a situation to keep this guy. Richard Cogswell, who works at Southern Connecticut State University. I reported some of the issues to him, and he said, okay, I'm going to bring it to human resources. The next day, I came into work late. He honked his horn, saw me. He wrote me up, and he was laughing in my face, and then I became a bad employee. When I see Jay Williams, and I see how he got fucked over many times in his life, and how he keeps himself together, that's the path that I want. Not other people fuck me over, and I just mess up my own life, So, I'm just like Jay Williams said, he has to like listen to his own advice and not to do that myself. All right, I got to get going. I have a relative coming home right now.